We have a human dilemma since the dawn of time of what do we do with people who are different.
They were trying to provide a humane, caring, protective environment where people could live out their lives in peace and tranquility. That was sort of the original intent of the institution.
It was loving. It was caring. It was all there for you. But when you come out here, you fall, you hurt yourself, and you need help. Nobody wants to get involved to help you.
There are therapists all over the country who are still trying to figure out how to help people pass their post-traumatic stress syndromes for all of what happened to them at these institutions.
The field of mental retardation really, I mean, it's a lot better. I want you to understand, I feel it's a lot better. But boy, it's come a long way, but it has a long way to go. A long way.
Oh my God, that place was rocking and rolling. We had more. I'll tell you, if you knew me when I was 9, you would understand. You would understand. So, yeah, I had a lot of good times, yep.
I would describe myself as a person that did not have a good childhood life. My father said, just leave that boy alone, he's just sick. My aunts, they said, I had a son that way too. She couldn't do nothing with him.
Bernadette was 3 years old. She could not communicate, didn't want to, I guess, and she was autistic. And but the mother had tried to kill her, and obviously didn't want the child. But we loved her, and she started to blossom. And yeah, I had Bernadette for 3 years. I guess the state figured it was more feasible to put her in Pennhurst and cheaper than to pay for her care in a foster home. And took her away.
We humans have a long history of how we treat people with mental differences. And in the United States, we go back to the mid-1800s when the institutional model was brought to this country by a gentleman named Samuel Gridley Howe, who took a vacation in Germany and came back with an idea for a model that people with mental retardation, then called the degrading terms of morons, imbeciles, and idiots, we began putting them out into separate, distant places in about 1850 in this country, and that was the beginning of segregation. We had almost 200,000 Americans with developmental disabilities in public institutions, separate, segregated, far from the rest of society, and isolated.
One of the rationales for having people go to Pennhurst in the early days was to keep them out of the mainstream of the gene pool, so that if there was a genetic cause to their disability, it could be not passed on to anybody else. So sexual relations and reproductive relations were forbidden.
People could not be married. In fact, they were very busy being sterilized. And we had books being written and theories being propounded in our professional journals about how these people are contaminating the gene pool and ruining the race, and they have to be bred out. Even today, people with the label mental retardation in Pennsylvania have to apply for permission to the Orphans Court to get married, even today.
My mother was a poor housekeeper, and I was put in a dark room, and she went to work. And there was a social worker named Violet came in there. She found me. I was sick as a dog in there, and they took my mother and sister to court, and they took me away from her, and I was put up there September of 42.
Sandra was brain injured at birth. I had a totally normal delivery period, except that it was precipitous, and the head was there, and the doctor wasn't, and the nurses crossed my legs to hold her back, crushed her brain. I've had to live with this, and I'm not the only one. There are many, many people who have problems. And we have to live with what we have.
My father, he almost suffocate me with a pillow. Before he died, he asked for my forgiveness, and I gave it to him. Then my mother put me up to Pennhurst. I had a violent temper and unruly. I was told they'll be institutionalized for the rest of my life.
My mother, she said that you will have to be put away somewhere, that I can't handle you no more. That's all she said. There was some people that came and took me up at Pennhurst. That was very scary. Very, very frightening.
Most of them were just put there because parents didn't want them and didn't know how to deal with them. So a lot of that happened. They just brought people there and dropped them off and pulled away.
We had no choice because her hyperactivity was taking effect on Christopher, who was 3 years younger. And so we had to make a decision. And the only thing available was Pennhurst.
The Pennhurst State School for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic was its own miniature city, a sort of closed society designed to accommodate about 1,800 people.
We had a barbershop and a hairdresser. We had doctors that were Pennhurst doctors. They had a dental place, psychologists, there was psychiatrists, there was social workers. We had a greenhouse. They had all kinds of things. It was very pretty.
I can still see the lawns down to the river and the buildings. In those days, they were pristine.
Usually a person was greeted by a nurse. There was sort of a family waiting room sort of thing, and the person was whisked off. Family did paperwork, met with a social worker, and that was the last that the family would have seen that child for the next 1 to 2 months.
It was a bit shocking initially to see something so big and so many people, but they told me where she'd be and what would be and what would happen to her. She had no problems.
When I got to Pennhurst, it looked to me it was all right. And I got on the hospital ward. It looked fine. It looked pretty good to me.
I nothing. I kept quiet. I'm scared.
What was the first thing you did when you went to Pennhurst?
Have a cigarette. Mm-hmm.
Once I was there, it was just something. I was amazed how things got very overwhelmed to me. I was just crying with tears, and I cried because my mommy's gone, my daddy's gone. I will never see my sisters again, or my brother, or anybody again. I'm here for life.
We delivered Bob to the superintendent of the institution and tried not to cry and waved and said goodbye. I don't think that he had any sense of what was to come. I don't think any of us did.
How did I become involved? Well, of course, going over to visit Bernadette, naturally, and but I thought it would be good to volunteer. I thought that would be, a good thing to do. And mostly trying to get them to do things and to talk and to sing, and I just enjoy being people, I guess.
I used to bring my records and take it to the ward. I have all these 45 records. Take it to the ward and play it for the kids so they could dance. Remember the barn? I used to say I got my education right beyond the barn.
We used to go down to the canteen and buy our cigarettes in there and buy our coffee or whatever. I could get on a bus and go to Pottstown, do my shopping and stuff like that.
I did reading, writing, arithmetic, played in the gymnasium and stuff like that.
Yep, they taught you about the Bible. Because the Bible, that's the book for me. I stand along with the Word of God, the Bible.
They did have classes that they went to, not educational classes, but things to activities. So they did have activity.
We had music therapy, by the way, too. Patients who were unusually excited or so would be an activity to maybe learn to keep time with music or using a drum or whatever to encourage a more normal, or more acceptable behavior.
My girlfriend and I went over and she played accordion, and we went to what they called the vegetable bins and the crib babies that had never had visitors or entertainment or anything. We would choose those places. We would sing to them. They couldn't talk. They couldn't do anything. They just laid there. Nothing. But their eyes would change. And it was so beautiful.
Sandra had a foster grandfather, and these people would come up, spend time with them, take them out for walks, talk to them, just to be a friend so that they saw other people. It was a marvelous program. I don't know what's happened to it. I don't think it still exists. But it was good. We had a lot of community support up in Spring City. And there were a lot of people from Spring City that did a lot for Pennhurst.
The staff of Pennhurst were terrific human beings. They were there because they cared, and they were trying to help. And I thought everything I saw was nice people trying to do the right thing for people who needed help.
I had no experience whatsoever, no experience at all. So I just went up to Pennhurst and filled out an application. I didn't quite know what I was getting into.
As far as what dealing actually with the clients, there wasn't that much training. You just went in there more like green, and you figured it out as you went.
I remember we went to the one ward, M2, and it was bath day. That was a shock. It was all men, and I mean, that was quite a shock my first day. And it was something like, oh my God, you know, what did I get into? And a lot of people. It was all different, it was all strange.
I know there was a lot that went on that we never heard of or were told. But, you know, other than that, I liked the job. I really did.
Yeah, I got along with everybody up there because they adored me.
Shorty McVeigh used to take me around on the wards. And every time he would make his rounds on the wards, he would take me. He was like a companion, a friend that could talk to, could understand things about a person.
When I first started there were patients, then they became residents, and then they became clients. I think that's how it went. To the people that worked there, they were always just the kids. I always thought if you treated them with respect and treated them like you would your own child, you know, although you weren't allowed to spank them.
I felt I was doing something that was helping someone. My little boys. I had all boys in my training program, and they were just so adorable. I had these two boys were twins. Oh my God, their names were Tony and Alex. I'll never forget them.
At Pennhurst, the people we knew and, you know, who worked there and who worked with Bob, by and large, showed great affection for him, right? And we could see that affection, and we saw that they were good people. And how then do you explain bruises and conditions and the rest?
We were called morons, all that kind of stuff. You couldn't even have a smile on your face. They told me to wipe that smile off of my face.
It was cruel. It was cruel. You call that. Wake up the. I tell my they call me pain neck, pain neck. One time, one of the nurses was badgering me. And I told her, Miss Landis, you better stop badgering me. See that bucket? I said. She said, yeah. I said, you keep on badgering me, you're going to be wearing that bucket. And let me tell you, She kept on badgering me. I picked up the bucket and threw it right on her. She never bothered me after that. No, she didn't. That's a true factor. And I went over to my ward, C14, like nothing happened. No, I don't like being badgered. I said, would you like to be badgered all the time? They said, no. I said, then why are you doing it to me?
There were a lot of days when I worked at Pennhurst that I didn't want to go. And there were a lot of days when I was afraid to go to work. But you needed a job and you went, you know.
I went in to get something out of the refrigerator, and he followed me in, and he pulled a knife on me. And he said, you know, he was going to kill me and this and that, and I talked him out of it. He was a big guy. I talked him out of it, and then till that time the other people had called for security, and they got in, and they got him down, and of course then they used shackles and straitjacket. Very rough with him, which I didn't like, but they were only thinking of me.
There were only 600 employees at Pennhurst, and there were over 3,000 residents living there. And to say it was not a nice place is putting it mildly.
Those kind of ratios can do basic care and not even do that well. And one of the things that I will always remember as long as I live was showering programs where 30 young men would line up against the wall, stark naked, and be taken in one at a time into a room where there was a drain in the center and a big hose that kind of came out, and two staff in rain slickers, yellow hat, yellow jacket, yellow pants, would hose people down, and one person would soap the person up, the other person would hose them down, almost kind of a fire hose kind of situation.
I remember, and we went in there, and they were bringing lunch in. And everything from the soup to the nuts to the dessert to the whatever was all dumped in one bowl. And that's the way they were fed, and you had 10 minutes to feed them. And what they didn't get down in 10 minutes, they didn't get. I remember talking to the instructor that was taking us through. If you plan on putting me here, I'm leaving, because I won't do this. I can't do that to people. They're human beings, they have feelings.
They had mice, sewer rats, roaches in the food and all that kind. There was mice in the bread, the ones that didn't know any better. They'd dig it out of their rear end and eat it. Two girls took 2 slices of bread, put BM between it and said with scrapple, and put salt and pepper on. She ate it and got sick.
Well, I never ate there, but we had dietitians according to their needs and according to their problems. Sandra never had any kind of problem with nutrition. They got exactly what they needed, I guess.
I wasn't allowed to visit Bernadette for 2 months. She lost 30 pounds during that time. Had she not been chubby, she probably would have died, but she wouldn't eat. And she had lost 30 pounds.
While you were at Pennhurst, were you ever visited by anyone?
No. Mm-mm.
No, I don't want to get in that conversation. But no.
I could understand the families that never came. If you had a child and your child died when it was an infant, that was a heartbreak. But it was a heartbreak that was kind of over. If you had a child that was never progressed past the level of a 6-month-old, was in a crib, couldn't see, didn't know you, didn't know anything, that would be a heartbreak every time you came to see him. I mean, I don't know if I could have done it myself. And some of their parents, they didn't come.
Once every 2 months out of a year, my father, my sister come up and see me. I try to tell them what it was like. It was horrible. Place. Very horrible.
Parents were not allowed to come to the wards, okay? The parents would go to a room on visiting day, Sunday, and we would then get clothing that we kept special place, and dress somebody up and then have them taken down to visit their families.
They had a visitor's room and a canteen, and it was in the administration building just down the hall from the superintendent's offices and the chief nurse's office and so on.
My mother, she used to bring me out to eat. And Buster's restaurant, they had honey dipped fried chicken and banana split.
I was there very frequently and got to know some of the other parents. You know, we'd meet each other and discuss our problems. I never had a bad experience in terms of being turned away if I had a question. They were always answered. The staff, I discovered, was extremely responsible. They'd been there for years.
You'd have maybe 2 aides with a ward with 50 or 60 clients to take care of, and they needed those work boys. So they took good care of their work boys, and they needed good work boys.
We used to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and at 6:30, I'd be at work in the morning at 6:30, and work the whole day through. I worked in the barber shop at Pennhurst. Used to go around and shave patients' faces and cut hair. They had to hold people down, lower functionaries. People couldn't keep still.
We used to work from 7 in the evening till 7 in the morning, right through the night. We had to clean soil up and urine up off the floor.
I worked in the kitchen up at Pennhurst in C9, C10, and I was the only girl in there that cleaned the tables, put the chairs on the top of the tables. I ran 2 dishwashers.
Started out by making bed and dry scrub and mopped the floors. I gave somebody a steam bath, sterilized medicine glasses, sorting medicine cards, putting toothbrushes on the bed. I took care of seizure patients, as well as giving enemas. Well, it gave me something to do.
And we used to have to bathe the patients there, too. And when a couple of them died, I had to take them, wash them and clean them up and everything. And then I would wrap them up in a sheet, tie their feet, and tie their hands together. And then put a sheet, wrap them in a sheet, and then take them down the morgue.
They didn't get paid, but I know they enjoyed the work, because when they stopped and they wouldn't let them do these jobs anymore, a lot of the clients were rather upset about that whole deal, that they weren't allowed to do it. The boys, the men, they liked that, working on the laundry truck or something like that, because it was a feeling of worth. To have a job, it gave them that they were needed. It was something to do that was productive. I think it made them feel good about themselves. to be able to do something and not just sit around.
I used to work out here, do janitorial work at Superintendent's house. The first thing I made the coffee for him, and then I scrubbed his bathroom floor and did other things.
All they did was make money while we done the work. Sitting in the office, smoking cigarettes while they got paid. That's what they were doing. I got no thanks for it.
They didn't belong there. They worked at Pennhurst. They were able to work and do things. They could have been out on their own and working and supported themselves and taking care of themselves.
There were many hundreds of people who never should have been at Pennhurst for 1 minute of their life.
An admission form filled out by a father for his son who went into Pennhurst in 1918. And on the admission form, it says that he had to be admitted because he says poon instead of spoon, and he had one seizure the year before. And that little guy spent the rest of his life at Pennhurst with several thousand of his closest friends.
Oh, another woman that I met, nothing wrong with her, but she was so horribly burnt. And she said she had a sister who was jealous of her. She said that the sister set her on fire because she was prettier than her. And horribly, I mean, she was scary. No, she really was. But there was nothing wrong with her. She said, other than they didn't know what to do with her.
They used to bring people out of Philadelphia that weren't mentally challenged. They were bad kids. They had no place else to put them, so they brought them to Pennhurst. They did not belong there. They're basically the ones that caused the problems. I mean, they'd bring them in there with handcuffs on and shackles and, what is this, and then they'd just take all the stuff off of them right there in plain view. I hated when I seen that bus, and they always brought them at night. I hated when I'd see that little bus pull in there.
A ward at Pennhurst in which all the men who lived there had cerebral palsy, a physical handicap. Probably very few were mentally retarded. What I realized as these guys got to leave the institution is that they had spent their lives almost doing virtually nothing with their minds active and their abilities intact, but for the restrictions that the institutional life imposed on them. Hungering to do more and having to sit and wait and wait and wait.
When I got there, they took off, they took off my good clothes and put me in a crib. Put me in a crib. That's where I'm staying. Stay at. Crib.
How long did you stay in the crib for?
Longer
long as I was there. Long as I was there.
They had good medical care. That I will say.
Oh man, they were the best doctors in the world. Better than doctors out here. I had better caseworkers up there than I did out here.
The standard of medical care is better than much of the standard in the community because of the fact that they were there on grounds. We had the professionalism.
This one day I was running dispensary, and one of the boys came in there, and he had an awful big welt on the back of his head. And I'd been hearing about this fellow, but this was the first time that I ran across something concrete. See, the boy told me who did it. When dispensary was over, I came out the back way, and there was this Ernie sitting on a railing at the back of the canteen. And I was really hot and bothered at the time. And I said, listen, you so-and-so, you touch one of my boys again, and I personally am going to take care of you myself.
Who did this, doctor? An attendant?
No, it was a patient.
One of the patients hurt another patient.
Yeah.
I see.
Ernie was a patient. So he says, you don't dare to touch me. There's nothing you can do to me. I says, well, before this day is out, you're going to find out what I can do for you. And then I had to start thinking about what I could do. I didn't know what I could do. So about 1 o'clock, a detail man came in, and I asked him what the most painful injection was that he had that wouldn't do any harm to the patient, of course. And I set this up and got him over on his cottage about 7 o'clock that night. And I forced him, I talked him into getting down on the bed. I didn't use any abuse on him at all. And gave him this injection, and he really hit the ceiling over that.
It was not unusual for physicians to be unlicensed. And a place that was called the Pennhurst State School for the Epileptic and Feeble-Minded originally never had a neurologist, which is typically the physician that would treat those things. Women didn't have access to a gynecologist. There was no ophthalmologist on staff to examine people's visions and to deal with people's vision disabilities.
The average person at Pennhurst who was there because they could get access to all kinds of medical care, health care, and therapy. That's why they were there. Remember, we took away their freedom, but we were going to give them treatment. The average person had 3 minutes with a psychiatrist each year.
I was sick many times up there. I had good teeth when I went up there, but now I used to eat apples, pears, corn on the cob, but now I don't eat that no more. Dr. Ridley, he ruined my ridges, he did. I just pulled them out, ridges and all.
That place was littered with scabies. You had to wear the same clothes for 5 days before you get a bath. They had one germ after another. I had hepatitis A and hepatitis B, scarlet fever, and impetigo, Vincent infection, if you know what that is.
I had gonorrhea, syphilis, a couple times. They kept me on the hospital ward about 6 months.
Not many of the clients had high blood pressure. I used to think it was, because it wasn't that stressful an environment. And very few of them had high blood pressure. But they gave out their share of tranquilizers, I have to say, and mood elevators.
I mean, there was nothing but a pill factory up there. You should see how much medicine those patients got. It was a mess.
Thorazine, Mellaril, Haldol. You spoke up, you acted out, you fought, you didn't do what you were told, you ended up with a drug or drugs.
Almost everybody was on, they put on Thorazine.
Some of the side effects include what are called extrapyramidal side effects, which are involuntary movements that look like seizure activity but are not.
Well, you get doped up from it. That's what happened there.
I used to take them, throw it down the toilet when they weren't looking. They had me on a lot of medicine up there. I hated that medicine, because I don't think they had the right to give that to me. There's nothing wrong with me, except for being an epileptic and cerebral palsy.
A friend of mine, he used to get me scared because he used to say, if you don't watch yourself here, they will write a little note and send you to a bad ward. They would put you in shackles and restraint jacket and all this kind of stuff. And I said, Doc, come on, don't tell me that. He said, yep, that's what they'll do. If you don't listen, that's what they would do. He was right.
We have found of late that it is quite effective to downgrade him a little bit and put him on a locked cottage with autistic type children or hyperactive children, a classification that used to be called low grades or that sort of thing. And it offends their dignity somewhat, and they don't like it. What we're trying to do is degrade him to a certain extent amongst his fellows here. They make fun of him then for a while afterwards, but I don't think there's anything inhumane about it or anything of that sort.
Bob sometimes, when Pennhurst came up, would put his arms the way you would in a straitjacket, so I don't have a doubt that he had those experiences.
There was just all kinds of punishment, placing someone in 4-point leather restraints for days or sometimes weeks or sometimes even months on end, being wrapped in ice-cold bed sheets, having food withheld, to being put into isolation kinds of situations.
And what they called a camisole, we call it a straitjacket. And restraints. And I don't know how often she was in a straitjacket, but I know that she fell while she was in the straitjacket, couldn't help herself, and broke her front teeth. And she has no front teeth.
The injury lists from Pennhurst read like battlefield reports in their incidence, in their severity, in their full range of occurrence. And that was characteristic of large-scale institutions.
I'm sure there were problems, dear. There are everywhere. Everywhere.
The notion that people with mental retardation are different, dangerous, don't feel pain the way we do, is not something confined just to the old days at Pennhurst. In the last couple decades, in dealing with injuries to people with retardation in other places around the country, I have met with, literally met with people from insurance companies who don't want to pay for damages to handicapped people because they feel handicapped people don't suffer and feel pain like everyone else.
I was treated rotten up there. I don't know why. I really don't know why.
One woman, she took a deck brush and hit her over the head and split her head up from here all the way up to here. They had a nerve to ask me to take her. I said, if I take her, I'm going to go down and tell them who did it, because this is a crime saying that woman didn't have a chance. Later, she died in the hospital. And I took her, cleaned her up and everything, and then I took her down the morgue.
I don't think anybody knows how many people died and were buried at Pennhurst. Most of the graves are unmarked.
I try to avoid things when I was there. It's kind of hard to avoid things because you hear lots of things and you try not to let it bother you. But sometimes you just can't. In the side of you, it builds up with anxiety. It builds up with that tension. That's when I thought that things wasn't right for me. While I was there at Pennhurst, I was going to take my life.
It goes to the situation of a lot of people in one place and too few staff to supervise at night. When every other outlet of sexual expression is shut off, we do find a way. Unfortunately, it was forbidden, so a lot of people experience sex against their will.
A lot of babies were born at Pennhurst. A lot of babies. Some of them were given out for adoption. Some of them were just kept there and became residents there. And some of them were, I hate this, disposed of.
How are they disposed of?
You're gonna make me say that, aren't you? Incinerators.
At night, that's when things start to happen. Awful things. They would have sex with me, and they wanted me to have sex with them. Very scary. I tried to push him away. He couldn't get up. He's too strong for me. People were using me. They did awful things to me. I tell them they do the same thing over after the attendants leave. I think that I'll never get out.
facts presented in this report must be rather alarming because they are true. Some zoos in the United States spend more money for the daily upkeep of their large animals than the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania allows Pennhurst to spend on its 2,800 retarded children. The zoo also usually wins out over the retarded when it comes to accommodations. Very rarely do you find crowded cages at the zoo, but it's quite common to find residents bunched into small cottages at Pennhurst. After comparing the zoo and Pennhurst, one must get the impression that society's animals are more important than society's children. By the looks of things, one must wonder.
I was a young reporter, about 28 years old. I was on the street for less than a year. I ran into a guy who did public relations for the mainline Junior Chamber of Commerce, and this guy was telling me about this hellhole. I told him if 1/10 of what he told me was true, I'd do a story. But the question was how to get in. So I confronted the president, or the doctor who was in charge, and told him that if he should allow me to expose this because it would help the situation, because no one seemed to care. Or I would spend every day standing outside the gates of Pennhurst, telling people what I saw inside, and ask the question, why can't we go in? This is a state institution that we're paying for. Why can't we see it? He decided it would be better to let me come in with the camera. And that's how we got in.
Many of these children have always been without the benefit.
There was a lot of crying. There was an awful lot of tears on a daily basis. There was a lot of moaning and groaning. It was a matter of, this is the way it is. You know, it affected me, it affected my crew, to the point where, you know, one cameraman after 3 days said, I'm not walking in there again. I cannot go back and watch this again. I lost a sound man the next day. I had to replace them. It was very difficult for us because we weren't used to it. We weren't used to seeing pain and agony every day. We weren't used to seeing people not care about other people. You go into a gigantic room. There are 80 metal cribs with children in there from 6 months old to maybe 5 years old. Half of them are shackled. Everyone is soiled with feces. And there are two people, two attendants, taking care of them. They're locked in a cage. And the only reason those people were not out of that cage was because they couldn't walk, and they could not walk because there was no one there to put a mattress on the floor so they can learn how to crawl and then walk. So they were confined for years without the ability to walk. Their legs were that thick around the thighs.
Bill turned on the cameras, and he got 5 nights at 6 o'clock every night. He got 5 nights of expose of what was really going on at Pennhurst, and it was unprecedented. And it was more in-depth coverage than what we got from the Willowbrook situation up in Staten Island with Geraldo Rivera. It was more intense. And he got Hubert Humphrey on the last night to speak about the plight of America's people with mental retardation.
Institutions are sometimes pitiful, just pitiful, disgraceful. And we just can't tolerate that, John. It's not right. We just can't look ourselves in the mirror when you know what goes on in some of these institutions. I don't know about your particular problem here, but let me tell you, if it's not good, then it's shameful. Because this rich country, this great country, and I must say it is very great and very rich, can afford to take care of the least of these.
Bill Baldini's Suffered Little Children, that was brutal.
I don't want to be impolite, but I felt a lot of it was all biased. It seemed to have a bias.
They talked about the clients that got injured. They never talked about the aides that got injured. There were bad things that happened. There were things that happened. Anytime you have a group of people, you're going to have a few bad apples.
I don't recall a single incident where the news media published anything positive about Pennhurst, and I felt badly about that because, in fact, I lost a lot of respect for the news media because of that. I don't currently get a newspaper.
One time they did a write-up on Pennhurst. There was a photograph of Bernadette, and she was laying on the floor. And I said, oh, poor Bernadette has to lay on the concrete floor. Bernadette loved to lay on a concrete floor. You know, she was here. She'd probably be out there when she was little. She'd be on the linoleum, laying on the floor because it's smooth and it's cool. So, I don't know. I'm not defending Pennhurst. I'm not saying it was great. I'm not saying it was terrible. It did the job. It did the job. That was the best that there was, and at least there was something.
We never received a response on anything we ever did like we received the Pennhurst situation. People were up in arms. They were calling us, they were writing us, they were pleading with us to do more, they were pleading with politicians, and that's what really got the ball rolling.
I filed the Pennhurst case May 30th, 1974, 20 days after my 26th birthday. The day the case was filed, I was sure that it would be over quickly. I could not imagine that the kind of injury and harm that we were talking about would be something the state would want to have paraded through a courtroom, and I thought we would settle the case very fast. And I was wrong.
What they wanted in that initial lawsuit was to fix Pennhurst, keep Pennhurst open, and make it better, which is what I wanted too. It's what we all thought was best.
After I filed the Pennhurst case, Tom Gilhul, on behalf of the Pennsylvania Association for Retarded Citizens, intervened in the lawsuit and joined our case along with the Justice Department.
Little did the ARC of Pennsylvania know it when they came to me that I had had the experience of the institution. To my eternal shame, seeking to help my mother come to terms in some sense with this very difficult experience, full of guilt and pain and many other deep emotions of sending her youngest son to the institution, I managed cheerfully to say, well, Pennhurst really looks like a college campus. Little did I know then, though I came to understand how foolish that observation was.
Pennsylvania Association of Retarded Citizens joined in the same lawsuit. And what really happened, they took the lawsuit away from Halderman and actually turned it into closing the institution.
The lawsuit was filed on behalf of Terry Lee Halderman and other people who were named and all the residents of Pennhurst. And I filed it in part after reading and learning in the records about all the injuries that Terry Lee Halderman suffered. At 4 in the morning, when no one was watching her, she fell, was found 2 hours later, bleeding profusely from the mouth. A staff person got permission to pull what looked like a tooth from the inside of her mouth. It turned out it was part of her broken jaw.
The Pennsylvania Association for Retarded Citizens took as their purpose to end Pennhurst, to move the public resources that were being harmfully expended there to the community, and to create with those resources a system of high-quality community services that would allow the people at Pennhurst and others to receive instead community services that would sustain them in a productive life in the community. The case went to trial over 11 weeks in the spring and early summer of 1977.
At the trial, one parent described the child was lifted up by a staff person in front of a parent of another resident and tossed through a door to the other side, landing on all fours. In 1976, 2 years after the lawsuit was filed, one resident was tied in restraints for 2,041 hours from August to October. Another resident tied hand and feet for 690 hours during only 1 month. We had evidence that a staff person watched someone being raped at the institution. Didn't interfere until after the rape was over.
We were not heard. I couldn't understand why they didn't talk to some of us. We were the ones that were living with it. You know, I could have said my daughter wasn't abused. She wasn't neglected.
We constructed what has come to be called the twin study. Not literally twins, but having in hand the disability configurations, the ages, the experience, and so on of the people at Pennhurst. We then matched each person at Pennhurst with 1, 2, or 3, sometimes more people living successfully in the community and receiving the services that allowed them to do that.
A woman, her son, had recently moved out of Pennhurst into the community. And she testified as a witness about how her son was now compared to what he was like at Pennhurst. And she described, with tears, going with her son to some nightclub and dancing and having a drink, and he was living this amazingly rich life now, and she was just overwhelmed at how much his life had changed, how wonderful things were for him, and she just wanted it for everyone.
When the case was filed, it was assigned at random to Judge Raymond J. Broderick. Judge Broderick was the most unlikely judge to rule in our favor in this case. Judge Broderick was a conservative Republican, a very kind, warm-hearted person, but politically not much in favor of governmental activities being interfered with by the courts. We learned as time went on, though, that he appreciated what the case was about. He, early in the case, asked one expert witness, as the expert was leaving the bench, do we need maybe one institution for the whole state of Pennsylvania? I know Pennhurst maybe should be closed, but maybe we need one institution. The expert explained no. Then finally, toward the end of the trial, Judge Broderick said one day from the bench, maybe it's time to sound the death knell for institutions for people with retardation.
I listened to the state, I listened to blah, 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 and then I raised my hand and I said, Your Honor, life stinks. I said, if you're interested in closing Pennhurst down, why don't you take some in your house and take responsibility?
Judge Broderick ruled in 1978 that no one should live at the institution, that people's constitutional rights were violated by the very existence of Pennhurst as a place to incarcerate people. And from then, the case took unexpected turns.
Of course we were thorn on their side here because we spoke the truth.
There ensued many appeals.
We felt that that Pennhurst wasn't that bad, and we were most annoyed at the state, and that's why we decided to organize and find an opportunity to intervene. And we followed it right through, and then we finally made it in the United States Supreme Court.
The first case that went to the Supreme Court concerned none of the 8 or 9 grounds that Judge Broderick had used for his original opinion. Instead, it affirmed his orders and decisions based on the Developmental Disabilities Bill of Rights and Services Act of 1975. As Judge Broderick said, it wasn't that hadn't given them enough grounds to support his orders, but they managed to find another one.
And it was at that point, we're now well into the mid-1980s, that the state of Pennsylvania finally agreed to close the institution and that no one with mental retardation should ever live at Pennhurst again.
almost a decade for Pennhurst to close, from 1978 until its closure in 1987.
The final settlement of Pennhurst, assisted by a judge mediating our discussions, was that Pennhurst would be closed. Everyone at Pennhurst would move to the community.
They thought, oh boy, we'll get everybody out into the community. We've got the community, we'll get everybody out. The community wasn't ready, and it still is not ready today. And what happened with the closure of Pennhurst was really tragic.
Nobody tells me anything. Nobody told me how to open a banking account. Nobody told me how to pay rent. Nobody told me nothing like that. I did it on my own. I did everything on my own. I had no caseworkers. Why have a caseworker? They wouldn't even know from a rent rebate to rent.
The staff that they had in the group homes, I don't know how it is today, but in the beginning, the group homes, their pay was not nearly what the people at Pennhurst were getting paid, especially the pay and the benefits the employees at Pennhurst got. So you wondered just exactly how good the staff was, you know.
Some of the case managers start out straight out of college. They haven't had the experience. That's part of the problem. If they paid the more, or were able to, they could get more people who've had more experience and more training.
I just wonder if they had the system of checks and balances that we had. And I just, sometimes I don't like to think about it. That when I've heard stories about some of the group homes and things, I think maybe you were better off in a bigger environment where there were more people.
All I know is that I still feel that we should have done a better job of looking into what their needs were going to be. I think the assessments weren't adequate, and very often that's the case today. A lack of adequate assessment of what the needs will be and the availability of the support services.
I think the state just wanted, they've closed down many other institutions since Pennhurst. They just wanted to be away out of the I don't want to say business, but out of the business of taking care of the mentally disabled.
I think a 23,000 waiting list in this state is horrible. The average person doesn't know that. That has grown and grown. When we had 500, we thought it was bad years ago. But more and more people are at home because there is inadequate funding to fund the community, as it should be. There are providers that are dropping out because they just cannot manage.
It was a very sad situation because because I lived there, and I just really missed it.
The case has been cited, each and many of its opinions, almost uncountable times across the country, because what proceeded from the Pennhurst decisions, beginning with that Christmas Day, which followed the original orders in 1977, was enormous attention and impetus to the movement to create community services and close the institutions.
Nationally, it did make a difference. I know because I was a national president of Voice of the Retarded. There were attempts all over the country to close facilities. Many of them did. Let's see, there are some states that don't have any anymore. And there are some states that are reopening. They're opening their programs again. So we still are unsettled. The whole situation is unsettled.
We've learned a great deal in the last many decades of the 20th century. And it is that understanding of the ability of people with retardation, however severe their disability, to participate in real ways in the community and to contribute directly and indirectly to the life of the community. That is the learning that underlies the revolution which the Pennhurst case has brought for people with disability and their families and for our whole nation.
As we saw in in the experience in the United States and is happening in countries all over the world, we finally found that there are better ways to support people and their families rather than segregation and isolation.
The story and the lessons we learned in the Pennhurst case are lessons we still, many of us, need to learn today.
Just say I'm trying to get a job. Fill an application out. Township line, red, blah, blah. And I turn around and they ask me, what school you went to? I said, if I said Springfield, I'd be lying. I said Pennhurst. And then they all freeze. It's like really mummies. And I said, excuse me, there's nothing wrong with me. Why are you doing this? So I went back and I asked them, are you hiring? They didn't hire. I don't blame the girls, but you know, I blame the people that won't hire. So, you know, but I do miss Pennhurst. More than you ever know.
Whatever you're feeling about the rights or non-rights of people with disabilities, I don't think you could have visited that institution and thought, yeah, it's okay for these people. Wasn't okay for anybody. Not anybody.
It's not the best way for people to have to live, but if they can't take care of themselves, they have to be taken care of. There's no doubt about that. You can't see them out on the streets, living like they live, no.
I came to understand the injury and the conditions were not a function so much of human will as they were a function of when you get people together in such density in a closed place, that's what happens. Whether it's an orphanage or whether it's a nursing home or whether it's a segregated institution for people with disability.
I have taken great satisfaction from what has happened over the years as a result of the Pennhurst decision. One night, and I think it was in 1979, Marjorie, that's my wife, and I were in bed, and I wanted to add my wife so he wouldn't think I was talking about anyone else at my age. But the phone rang, and I answered the phone, and a voice very haltingly said, "Are you Judge Rock?" I said, yes, what do you want? He said, "I learned to dial the phone today, and you are the first person that I've called to say thank you for getting me out of Pennhurst. I have a job."
I don't want to go back. 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 I don't miss that place. No, sirree. They'll never get me in another one. I said to one of the staff here, I said, I never want to go into a place like Pennhurst again or a nursing home.
It's kind of amazing to think of what we went through in this century and the century before, and the Jim Crow laws, and the Civil Rights Movement, and the Voting Rights Act, and all these things, the Civil Rights Act. We've been through all these things, and yet still, the only group that I can think of that you can look them in the eye and say, well, we've studied you, we've looked at your situation, and we've decided it'd be best for everybody if you were kept apart from the rest of us. That's the essence of segregation. And are we still doing that? Are we still saying you have to be kept apart from the rest of society? Yeah, we are. We're still doing that.
They tried to close them all with the Pennhurst case, and we still have institutions, and we still have 5 right here in this state. We couldn't possibly take care of Chris and Sandra today at our ages. It just isn't possible, because I also have my husband to take care of, who is disabled. He's in a wheelchair. And I may be wrong, but I believe my daughter is the only one that ended up at a private facility. And she ended up there because, not because I refused, I did look, but there was always something that was missing. There was not openness about the costs and what it was going to be. That still is often the case today. They've convinced a lot of people that community is the only way to go. I still feel there are some that will not make it, and I'd like them to take a look at them. I really, people should see severe disability. Most people just don't know it. They've never seen it. They've never been involved with it.
I found my mother. It took me a year to do it. I took a red rose down to her in a little white vase. I took the rose down and I said, Mother, this is Bettina. She said, I remember you, Bettina. But she said, I'm sorry for what I did to you. I said, Mother, that's the past. This is the future. You look at the future, not the past.
Oh, boy. Let's see.
Come on.
In 1969, a blind fellow got us together. And we walked over the Carterway, and he used to come to see me. We used to go to the canteen together. Back then, the boys and girls weren't allowed together, but anyway, everybody found out about it.
I really wanted her. I really wanted her, I did.
I left there April 12, 1971, got married August 3rd of the same year.
Here we are. 35 years together.
Caseworker said they would never make it for a marriage, that we're wrong for each other, that I'll be sorry if I get married. I wasn't sorry at all.
Without hers, well, forget it.
We kissed in front of the police officers. They asked about us, told them we're married.
What did they say then?
Well, I confessed my sins to them. Tell them I committed every sin in the book.
Yeah, but they're not ministers, you know.
And I tell the judge that.
What sins have you committed, Violet?
Well, I just got them talking.
She gets them talking, you know.
This is Roland Johnson speaking. I've been knowing that I had AIDS for 4 years. And I was a child at Pennhurst. I had been sexually abused by my patient up there. And that's what happened, that's how I picked it up. Well, I was no more than 5 or 8 years old. I couldn't understand why this allowed this stuff to go on. Like I tell everyone, please do not send anyone, place any child or adults back in an institution because it's no place for them.